And I think just those conversations, I'm hopeful, it's like the gospel. I'm just planting the seed, right? Allow it to be watered by hopefully many other people as time goes on to see if it bears fruit over time.
You're listening to Ice Cream with Investors, a podcast that is dedicated to teaching you how to better invest your money so that you can live a more intentional life. I'm your host, Matt Four, and it is my goal to teach and empower you to remove the roadblocks to your financial success.
Russ, welcome to the show.
Matt, man, thank you for having me on. It's great to catch back up with you again.
Absolutely. Well, you know that we like to start with the difficult questions here. What's your favorite ice cream?
Dude, I'm not that hard. I'm a pistachio guy. How about that? Like if I can find a place with a good pistachio ice cream, that's going to be my go-to almost every time.
So we were out in California recently, and we waited in line for this gelato place for 42 minutes for this ice cream. And if there's a line around the corner, it's got to be good, right? They had by far the best pistachio ice cream, I think, gelato that I've ever had in my life. So salty, so creamy. It was delicious.
Fantastic. Yeah, you can't beat that.
Yeah. Well, tell our listeners, what's the scoop? What do you do today?
Man, I've been running a company called Wealth Without Wall Street for a while, and we've been on a mission to help people break free from trading time for money, right? I think our goals, our missions are aligned. It has been kind of on the heart of my business partner and I to help break the myths that exist out there of why Wall Street is not the place to build wealth. And that, is really nothing more than a marketing campaign for the financial sector to be able to create passive income for themselves. I was having a conversation the other day, Matt, with this guy, and he was like, man, you talk about passive income. What does that look like? I was like, well, that you've been taught to save and invest in your retirement plans, right? Get a good rate of return. And if you do really, really good, you get to retire and run off in the sunset at like 60. He's like, exactly. I was like, yeah, that's a scam. That's a myth. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, have you ever noticed that the financial advisors live in really nice houses, drive really nice cars, and go on amazing vacations? He's like, yeah. And I was like, did you know that those advisors get to make the same amount of money when they're on vacation as when they're actually in the office talking to you? He's like, well, how's that work? I was like, because they have passive income or reoccurring income. And it comes in the form of management fees. And what we do is teach people who want to become financially free how to get there faster. Now, they don't go build necessarily an investment practice. They go and build themselves as an investor and start building streams of income that come in regardless if they're at work, working in something hopefully they're passionate about, or if they're out vacationing, spending time with their family, doing the things they really want to do.
Yeah, I never even thought about the fact that Wall Street gets paid a passive income stream to build their businesses, and that's why they're so successful, is the more money you give them, the higher their fees and reoccurring revenue is.
Well, here's the thing is, I know we'll get into talking about income and passive income, and I know that's something that you're doing a lot of and have become very successful at. I think people sometimes also make the assumption that passive is always passive, but that's not the case. I like using the investment world as an example because the advisor who started, they worked really hard to network, build relationships, create assets under management, right, to get to a point where they have that recurring revenue. Or, a prominent example is Michael Jordan. A lot of us, I don't know if you've seen the new movie with Nike.
It's really good. Yeah.
Well, we see it, and I'm not going to give away for everybody who hasn't listened all the details, but one of the things that I loved about this is they said at the end of the movie that he brings in like $400 million a year from the royalties from the Air Jordan brand. Well, he worked really hard early on in his career to create the ability for that relationship to happen, but now he's reaping the rewards. That's what passive income is. It's working, being involved early on, and creating something that can happen over and over and over again for a long time, if not indefinitely.
Yeah, I think Michael Jordan is a very competitive person, but one of the quotes they mention in the movie is like, nobody's going to want to buy my shoes if I'm not winning championships on the courts. And that's really helped drive his success as well. And to your point, now he's making hundreds of millions of dollars a year and not even playing basketball anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was like Googling it. It said maybe he made like under 100 million in his like 13, 14 years actually in professional basketball. And now he makes way more than that in just 1 year just from the royalties.
Yep. Well, you didn't start Wealth Without Wall Street before having a history. So I wonder if you could take us back to where did your passive income journey really begin?
Passive income journey. So I actually, the first passive income I had, Matt, was I bought a little single family rental property in my college town, Auburn, Alabama. And a buddy of mine had just converted a bunch of apartments into condos. And he had one that came back to him. The guy went into bankruptcy, and he's like, "Man, I got a deal for you." And I was like, "Oh man, okay." Like, I want to get into real estate. And when that first $97 came in a month, I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, right? Like, I guess I could have taken a couple friends out for ice cream. Yeah. And up until probably the third month, when the apartment above it, or condo above it, flooded out my unit, and I paid ServPro, I feel like, for the next 2 years out of that $97. And that's where it began, and that's where it stalled. I'd say that unit actually cost me 11 years on my passive income journey. And here's why. It's because I didn't really relate to the specific investment. Like, as much as I wanted to be an investor, when I realized that none of my nieces and nephews ended up wanting to go to Auburn. I had like so many. I had like almost 20 nieces and nephews. I thought, they're all going to go down there.
Guaranteed.
I got a place for this thing to be rented. I'm going to have enjoyment because of it. None of that happened. And as much as I wanted to, promote the unit, it was one unit of 20-something thousand units down there. And it was nothing peculiarly interesting about it that would like allow people to say, if that's available, I'm going to rent it. And I just was like, this is what passive investing looks like. I'm out. I don't want to do it. And it wasn't until Joey and I started our podcast in 2017 and started interviewing all these really interesting people like yourself. And I just realized that there's so many more investment ideas out there that ultimately, as I didn't know what it was called at that time, I didn't know what my investor DNA was. And as I learned more about it, I realized that my investor DNA was more connected to things that I could influence and manage. And then I kind of built it up, and it spawned from there.
Yeah, so I've heard you mention the investor DNA a couple times on your podcast, and really helping investors or people that come to you define what their investor DNA is. And that really comes back to what I think is clarity. Like, if you don't know which route you're going, any road will take you there. It's important that we know what our end goal is before tying what type of investment we want to do before we get there. So help us understand, if I'm sitting down with you for the first time, I've heard about passive income, I want to get involved in building passive income streams. How do you help people figure out what their investor DNA is?
Yeah, so the investor DNA, I think, is probably one of the most vital things behind knowing why you would want to be financially free from the beginning. You said clarity, right? So we always start from that standpoint. If someone's why is not greater than their why not, it really won't matter, right? And when people understand that they've been trading time for money and it's preventing them from doing A, B, or C, then and we say, hey, there's a way to overcome A, B, and C, then you can actually get to that point faster when knowing it. We go through that process, and one of the things that you said is we want to help them understand who they were built as. Like, God made us a very specific way. We see the world very uniquely, but it's not so unique in the fact that nobody else has ever seen the world that way. And so we utilize some personality assessments that tell you probably some of the things you already knew. Like, so many of us have taken, Myers-Briggs, Culture Index, DISC, Colby, all these things. But what I never found is that how did that relate to the investment world? Right? I came out of the investment, financial world. I was a certified financial planner for a number of years, and we would do these risk analysis, right? Assessments. And they were really nothing more than based upon your age and your tolerance for risk, which, again, a lot of that is just kind of make-believe garbage, in my opinion. But what was evident to me is that people see the world very uniquely, and they want to be able to invest in things that connect to them. And like when I was investing in that condo down in Auburn, I wasn't connected to the way that it was. It was managed by someone else. I couldn't influence it. So regardless of how much money or how little money it made, it wouldn't have made a difference to me. Like, I could have went and bought 100 more of those, and it would have brought in more money. But because I wasn't connected to how I could influence it, I didn't want to do it. But when I did my investor DNA, I realized, oh, I love to influence. I love to be able to have the ability to, have a conversation with the operator and talk a little bit about how can we market it better? How can we grow this better? And that's what we end up doing, is utilizing like the top 10 that we've seen passive income streams that exist out there. And we started matching them up to this personality assessment. We said, oh, if this person is a driver, here are the things that are going to be pros in a driver's eyes. And here's going to be the cons. Here's the things that they're really not going to want to do. And that way, when someone is sitting there out there, they're trying to figure out, where do I start? And they've got just a world of options. A lot of times that could be the obstacle that prevents them from even taking the first step, because they're like, well, how do I know which one's the best? What if I make a mistake? And all of these things. So what we've tried to do is connect the dots for them, narrow the path to one or two options, so then they can go deeper. And if not, again, isn't foolproof, doesn't mean it'll 100% be accurate. But what we found is it has eliminated a lot of things that people didn't know about an investment beforehand. And they were like, oh, because I understand that, there's no way I would want to do that. So let me try these options. And we've seen a lot of success from the people who've gone down that path.
Yeah, that's really smart, because the way I'm kind of thinking about that too is there might be some sort of asymmetrical investment that I could go down, but the ride towards that asymmetrical outcome is very ups and downs, very choppy, very up 100% one day, down 25% the next day. And whether you think you're control of your financial emotions or not, that's a really hard journey to go down. And you need to know that you're about to go down that journey. Whereas if you invest passively in like something like a real estate note, for instance, it's literally just collecting payments. There's not a whole lot of ups and downs there are going to be beyond somebody not paying a payment. So when you're going down this path, what are some of the things, you mentioned 10 income streams. If I'm more of a driver, what are some of those income streams? And then maybe balance it out. If I'm more of a passive person, steady Eddie, what are some of those?
Yeah, well, the driver, right? What do we want? We want quick results. we want it to be super straightforward and see how that thing works out. The steady Eddie person, they're looking for something that anything that would be quote unquote new, hasn't been working for 25 years or longer, are probably not going to do it. I'll start with the latter since we're there. Is short-term rental. That has been something that has become very popular, very exciting for a lot of investors. And Joey and I, we had a short-term rental business for about 3 years. We actually recently just sold it, but it was something that we loved because it was new, was exciting, that appealed to us. But yet the person who is what we would say like on a DISC profile, a C profile or an S profile, very cautious, very steady, the newness of it, not understanding the volatility and the occupancy within it, is something that they are going to shy away from more times than not, right? The only time I see an S or C get involved in, say, short-term rentals is when it's something like maybe in the mountains, right? Those are down at the beach, and those properties, they have track records and histories for the last 10 or 15 years, right? Because VRBO has been around forever. It's not a new thing. Airbnb has just been great at marketing it and making it more accessible to the average person. So when I see people that want to get into short-term rentals, if they have an S or C profile, I'm like, you're going to only want to do it in these type of markets that have history. Well, for the D profile, the I profile, quick results, unique results, the ability to control and expand the business. So short-term rentals is definitely one of those areas that I see them loving. I see people in the land flipping world. I don't know if you guys have interviewed Mark Podolsky or his team, the Land Geek, before, but I love that aspect because you can kind of do deal making. You can be involved in it. It's something that you can have results fairly quickly, and it allows you to have really good returns. I see people with D profiles in private lending, right? Because again, it goes down to being able to make quick decisions and seeing results. The profile that typically more steady Eddie, the syndication route. I know that you guys are in that world, and it's one of those things that I can analyze the deal, I can see the opportunity, I can analyze the people running it, and I can minimize my risk if I want to invest in multiple deals. I love that, right? So there's lots of different kind of nuances, but for us, being able to create kind of a matrix for people to look at and see the pros, the cons, and what's all involved, both financial, time, and everything else, I think helps people narrow the path to figuring out which one's the best way for them to enter and expand.
Yeah, I hear it a lot in the financial industry around the end game matters, but if you get to that end game, it's not a matter of being there, it's the journey along the way. And I think what I'm hearing from this conversation is we all want to be financially secure at the end of our journey, but how you get there is going to determine how happy you are along the journey as well. So if I'm involved in something that doesn't make me happy every day, the end result will not be as satisfying, even if it's the same result in terms of being financially free.
Well, I agree with that, and I'll add a little nuance to it. I don't think we have. I heard someone else say this, and I can't remember who to give credit to. They said, you don't have to be happy doing what you're doing if it makes money. But it needs to give you the ability to do something that you're happy doing, right? There's some people that we have in our community, they make, great incomes, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. They don't really like the job that they're doing, but it provides them the ability to go invest in deals and create passive income streams that's ultimately going to be their way out of it, right? And once that happens, they probably will exit that space. But also, when it comes to investing, I do think that the things that you're investing in have to be connected, because otherwise you probably won't expand. I'm just using my own experience. Is I didn't expand my investments through the single family rental property. Not that that's not a good one, right? Like, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of listeners that's exactly the way that they've created financial freedom for themselves. Like the Camuras, we interviewed them. They buy a property like every 5 days. We interviewed Mitch Steven. He bought a property like every 2 to 3 days. And had been doing it for 20 years. So it's obviously a very successful strategy, but it wasn't for me because I wasn't related to it. So I think the things that we're not connected to, we won't invest a lot, and so it won't make a difference. So It depends on the scenario, but I want to add that little caveat, because I think, in work, sometimes we can do it if it justifies the end of what we're trying to get to. But investing, I do think it's way more accurate, because ultimately the things that we really get excited about, we will put more money and more effort and more focus on it. And I think it'll help us get those results faster.
Yeah, so to that point, you've talked a lot. You guys have an passive investor report that you produce out monthly. And when I was looking through that, you've got a ton of things you're involved in, from used to be the short-term rental to e-commerce's businesses to land flipping businesses to having a community and informational products and things like that. Everybody always wants to talk and point to the successes, but given the amount of investing experience that you have, what are some maybe areas that you didn't have as much fun in that investment journey, and how would you, looking back on that experience, have known that going into it, so people can maybe avoid that pitfall?
Yeah, well, man, the list is longer probably on the things that I've done wrong than the things I've done right. And people say, well, Rush, should I invest in all of these things? Because I see you guys posting on all these things. I was like, well, yeah, if you want to start a podcast community, and you can call it education, right? I like lots of things, but I can justify it because we get to share it with the audience. There's a handful of things that have been super successful. There's been a lot of things that we've gotten involved in that haven't, right? I've invested in a handful of syndications that went really wrong, and because I didn't know the operators. And I had no way to influence the outcome of what was happening. And some of those deals, ultimately were not what I hoped them to be. And if I could go back and had some conversations with the people that I could have gotten deeper down that road, I think I would have either not invested or gone a different track, right? Now I've invested in some syndications because I know the operators have been able to find more about them, and have had a lot of success there. So I think, that's one area. Joey and I have put our toe in the water a little bit in the Turo and RV space. And I would say for most of us, that is not a place to build revenue. It's fun to, RV hack or to car hack. My daughter's getting a a fancy luxury car actually probably this afternoon, and we've had the conversation of what she has to do to operate it. But it's not going to be a revenue generator. It's going to be a car hack. It'll ultimately pay the payment, allow her to drive it a couple times a month and enjoy it, and teach her a little bit about business. But it's not the thing that I think will have ultimate success. For us, private lending has not been as good as I would have liked it to be. Like we've did some private mortgages and tied up money for longer than we wanted to. The return on them was good, but not great. And so I realized that, that's an area that, because we are not that SC profile, right? It didn't truly just match up with who we were. We wanted faster results. We wanted to be able to find another opportunity and get involved in that. And that was an area. Flipping houses for us. Like, we bought a luxury home that we were going to actually turn into like an event space. I know you're up in the Nashville area. We had stayed in a space just south of there in Franklin, and we're really excited about the idea of starting like an event location with luxury accommodations. And so we bought a property subject to the mortgage and thought that was pretty cool. And then the fact that we have low details, didn't realize that the neighborhood and the city were going to revolt on us, and they changed their minds on the rules governing that, and so ultimately we ended up having to flip that property and realize that we're not home flippers, and so that's something that we weren't going to expand into. So those are just a handful of areas from my own experience, and again, I think there's so many positive scenarios out there of people that have done all those things I just said and had great experience, but for me, those were just not a fit with my investor DNA.
Yeah, and that would fit in Franklin, that last one there, if you didn't have close neighbors. If you have close neighbors, people are pretty noisy down there, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned teaching your daughter about a little bit of business acumen. This is something that I'm kind of dwelling in my mind right now about how you teach the kids about money. So the kids are 7 and 5 on this side. Maybe talk a little bit about how old your kids are and some of the things you're doing with your kids to help them teach them about business, money, passive income streams.
Yeah, so mine are a little bit older. So I have 17, 15, 13, and 10. And my 17-year-old is right now working with me with this Turo business. So we're about to have our second car. It's it's a hobby, not a business, right? It's not making money. But one of the things that I wanted to do is be able to teach her how a business works, right? There's cost of goods sold, there's marketing, there's all the kind of follow through, the labor, all the things. And I was struggling because the businesses I get involved in, I only get involved if there's already operators. Mm-hmm. And we'd used some of her money before. When she turned 16, I was like, okay, well, we'll take a loan against your life insurance policy. We'll go buy furniture, put it into a short-term rental. We'll let our manager manage it. The cash flow that you get can repay your insurance policy and allow you to get a new car, or a car, not new, but a car. And she did that. It was great. But there was really very little ways for me to help her understand how that business worked, because it was completely hands off to me. While she learned how money worked a little bit by, I have to, if I'm going to buy a car, I don't want to pay cash. Here's why I don't want to pay cash. Explain that. We've played the game Cash Flow for kids when they were littler, and then we went and bought Cash Flow 101 as they've gotten older. But I think, it's those real life applications that are super helpful. So they've read, Profit First, Becoming Your Own Banker. We did the Rich Dad Poor Dad for teens with them, even did interviews with them on the podcast. But another thing we've been doing is that for probably the last, 5 years for my oldest, they've attended at least one, if not two, some sort of financial workshop, seminar, mastermind with me. And it's fun now to see, as we do these events a couple times a year, that we have probably 10 to 20 teens that show up. The parents are bringing them. And so now they're able to create their own little groups as well and have these conversations. So that's been, one of the ways. It's making it more common, right? I think it's when it's not the conversation, the normal conversation in the household is awkward, but for us, it's more common. My son is running a snow cone vending operation right out of the playhouse in my front yard. And yesterday he realized that we live out on 30 acres, and there's his cousins.
Not a lot of foot traffic.
Yeah, his cousins are the closest people to us, and he's like, "Yeah, Dad." He's hit me up all last night and this morning. I think we need to buy a snow cone truck. I was like, "What is a snow cone truck?" He goes, "One of those trucks that rides around and people can buy snow cones." And I was like, "Oh, see, now he's starting to think like, yeah, the foot traffic is pretty low when we're at the end of a dead end, gravel road way out in the middle of nowhere. But if we start going to our customers, we got more opportunities." So I just, it's just fun to get them involved in these things and hopefully see them have these, conversations at an earlier age. I know I'm going long here, but I'll share one more story. I took my daughter on a trip to a college trip last fall. And we were sitting there after going and doing all the stuff, and it was fun. And we sat down in the little cafeteria area, and all of these hundreds of students are buzzing around. And I said, I want to just talk candidly about kind of what's going on. I was like, 90-something% of all of these kids walking around will get to a point where they are dissatisfied in the jobs that they're in, and they'll wonder what else is available to them. What else can they do? They'll have, done all of this school, trained to be whatever profession they're in. They'll work for 10, 15, 20 years hard, and they'll be palm to the sky wishing there was something else. And I was like, I just want to expose you to these things earlier on so you know that there are options. And if you decide to go down the same path as every one of these kids, then that's fine. But I want you to know that most of these will be searching for companies like ours to show them ways to get out of that. And I think just those conversations, I'm hopeful, it's like the gospel. I'm just planting the seed, right? Allow it to be watered by hopefully many other people as time goes on to see if it bears fruit over time.
Yeah, I mean, my strategy has been to try to talk about it, try to normalize money, try to talk about adding value to the world, because that's where you're going to get your biggest return on investment. So I talk about who's the richest person in the world. It's Jeff Bezos. Why is he the richest person in the world? Because he provided the most value to more people than anyone else in the world. You can order anything at any time and it show up on your doorstep within 4 hours. That is very, very valuable, and that's why he's compensated for that. But I think it's also equally important to have a community of people that are telling the stories too, so it's not just you, the parent, in that situation. And one of the things I admire about what you guys have built is you've built that community around that. So I wonder if you could just shed some light, talk us through the Wealth Without Wall Street community, what you guys are teaching over there, and give us a little insight into what you all have going on that front.
Yeah, so the community was huge for us. When we started our podcast, we did it by accident. Joey couldn't even spell podcasts. I had never listened to one. And a younger guy on our team was like, I think you guys should do this, because at the time we had a kind of a brick and mortar office, and people locally were, 99% of our clients were local. Only ones that weren't, people had moved away. And they would come into our office and they'd talk a little bit about the things they're doing with their money, and it'd be kind of exciting. And I'd share it with the next 2 or 3 people, that I thought would be, interested in something similar. And I just thought, this is very inefficient. Like, we need a way to share these ideas with everybody. And that's where our younger guy was like, hey, you guys start a podcast. And so we did. And we just thought we were going to have a weekly conversation with our existing 500 to 1,000 clients that we had built. And with that, it ultimately spawned into this much bigger thing. We've gone over 1 million downloads on the podcast, and people, doing business with people all over in all 50 states. But we realized that in order to really help all of those people, we needed a place for them to go and to feel like they were not isolated, right? Because I think one of the hardest things for us is you're listening to this podcast, you probably don't have 5, 10, 100 people or more that you can have a regular conversation about, hey, I'm investing in things that have nothing to do with my 401k or my IRA, right? I'm not going to try to work at this job for the next 40 years to ride off in the sunset. I'm looking for strategies that to let my life look more like Matt's life, right? I'm inspired by what Matt has accomplished. And I think when we don't have that community, it is sometimes defeating and sometimes prevents us from getting to that spot. And so we knew we wanted to do it. We started off with a Facebook group, but we realized that had obstacles. And, you go to look at something on the Facebook group, and before you know it, you're off into cat memes and political, conversations. And we're derailed for 3 hours in a direction that didn't get us any closer to being financially free. And so we built this community on a kind of a platform that you can go to the App Store and type in Wealth Without Wall Street and download it. And so our conversations are all around how do we create financial freedom? What are ways other people are doing it? And it's no solicitation, so we don't allow the people in there to go, hey, I'm investing in this deal over here. Would anybody else want to invest with me? Like we want to guard against that. Now, of course, we're constantly removing the crypto scammers that get in and start private messaging people. But that, if there was a way I could keep them from getting in from the beginning, it'd be great. But then we went deeper. We started to have people saying, hey, you guys are quote unquote the passive income kings. How do we start learning more about how to become better investors? And so we did our first event, Matt, 2 years ago, actually just south of Nashville in Franklin, and we invited 35 people, and 32 people came, and that was the genesis for starting our first passive income mastermind group. And we meet 2 times a month virtually, 2 times a year, all over the place. We just got back from the British Virgin Islands with our group, and have a trip planned to Denver in October with that group. And it's just amazing to see the community grow and just continue. So now we're a little over 7,000 members, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think I want to take the time to applaud you on the fact that most of the time somebody comes on and says those sorts of things, it's like, oh, but you got to pay this much a month to be a part of the community. You all are offering an opportunity to say, hey, I want to stick my hand up and be around people that are thinking about this, talking about this, and have different experiences and ideas around this. Oh, and if I want to go further, then I can, and through a paid wall, but you don't have to pay to be a part of your community. You just have to show up and add value.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely something that we love. It's a passion project for us. It's the thing that I guard as much as I possibly can, and that's the reason why we're very protective of who gets in there, so that way, that somebody isn't who's learning about how to become an investor doesn't make a decision without the knowledge. And so yeah, it's fun to see that grow, and to be able to add people like yourself and others who can come in and continue to add value to the group and ask questions, and everybody learns together through great questions.
Yeah. Well, Russ, I know you got to pick up a car for your daughter there, so I want to be cognizant of your time and transition us now into our last round. We're calling this the 5 toppings. Our first one is, what is your favorite book, or what is a book you've read recently that's given you a paradigm shift?
Man, great books. I mean, there's so many that I could point to. I'm going to pull up my Audible because I love talking about some of the most recent ones. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out my favorite investment is land flipping, right? So for those who have not read the book Dirt Rich, my good friend Mark Podolsky has an amazing book that I would point you to say, hey, this is something that can help you. One of the recent ones I've been listening to is The Second in Command, because I think as a visionary kind of CEO mentality, I know my strengths, but also know my weaknesses, and having people that are operators around me is super important. And so I've been digging through materials that connect to that extreme there. Trying to think of another one that
is that Cameron Herold?
That is Cameron Herold, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was the COO for Got Junk, and so some people have seen that brand take off, and so anyway, I won't waste any more time. Other ones that I would talk about, most people, the building a story brand, Donald Miller right there in your backyard. That was one of my favorites for a long time.
Yeah. Well, speaking of clarity, Cameron Herold also wrote Vivid Vision, which I'm digging into right now as well.
That's great. Yep.
Our second one is, I believe the person you become 10 years from now is directly correlated to the habits that you have and the things you do every day. What are some of the things that you do every day?
So I wake up in the morning, I go work out with 2 to 3 guys. Have been doing that for the last 3 to 4 years straight. And I follow, I wear a Whoop band. So health is important to me. So I'm a Whoop guy. So I'm looking at my sleep. I have, a health coach and having daily conversations via text and weekly conversations through them. I love to get in the Word and have some quiet time, spend time, better understanding the Lord through that. And man, go on a bike ride as often as I can with my 10-year-old son, who has just a vigor for life that encourages me every day.
Yeah, infinite energy at that age.
Yes.
Our third one is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Find a great mentor and make sure before you get into partnerships that you know everything can know about that person, because partnerships are like marriages. Just you take out the sex, but it has all the other things. And so great mentors and great partners can make amazing life success.
Yep. Our fourth is, what is the thing that you're most proud of in your life?
Man, most proud of being able to have conversations with people like you, man. Like the ability to, one of my vision board goals, 13 years ago, if I showed you the picture, it would show a microphone. And at the time, it was, I was speaking in front of 50 to 100 people in some monthly, bi-month, every other month kind of basis. And so I had this vision of, man, what if I could speak to 500 people one day? Would that be amazing? And to be here talking with you, and you have thousands, not tens of thousands of people that are going to hear this, that just blows me away constantly, that we have this ability to impact people's life and to have platforms that can reach people. So that's super cool.
Yeah, going from speaking to 50 people to 1 million downloads, I think is a good little headline right there.
Yeah, totally.
Our fifth one is, if you could sit down and eat a bowl of ice cream with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why? People who know me know that I got a chance to be mentored by a man named Nelson Nash, and he wrote a book called Becoming Your Own Banker, and it was an amazing influence in my life. If there was one book I would always tell people to read, Becoming Your Own Banker, but I'm sure you've shared it with people and others on your podcast have. I think back to all the times that he stopped by my office that I was on a call or in a meeting that I couldn't had that bowl of ice cream with him, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think, man, if I could go back and have all of those, because every time I sat down with him and had conversation, he was the most well-read and the most interesting person that I've ever met, and he always answered questions with more questions. And I think every experience I left better and more thoughtful, and he would tell us to think about our thinking. And I would love to have more of those conversations and look forward to some point in eternity to having that talk with him. Yeah, if nothing else than to listen to that man's accent. I mean, just the best accent I think I've ever heard in my life. And yeah, you're right. We've shared the book several times on the show. I've got it hanging on the bookshelf back here because it's such an impactful book in my journey, as well as I'm sure many, many others.
Yeah.
Well, Russ, thanks for the time. I appreciate you coming on the show. Very impactful. If our listeners wanted to reach out to you, learn more about what you've got going on with Wealth Without Wall Street, where is the best place we could point them?
Yeah, so I'd love for you, if you go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/ice cream with investors. We've given you basically access to connect with us in many different ways, whether it's on social, through our podcast, to join our community, or for those who are like, oh, I'm interested in a mastermind. I'm interested in being around other 8-9 figure entrepreneurs that are like scaling to 200% of passive income over their monthly expenses. We give you all those opportunities on there.
Perfect. We will link those in the show notes. And then Russ, thanks for coming on the show.
Man, Matt, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Ice Cream with Investors. If you like what we serve you here, it would mean the world to me if you would like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast app.